What's up, ego hackers? This is Chase with csjoseph.life doing another episode for season 22. This is episode 4. What are the cognitive transitions for ENFJs, aka the cleric, aka the mentor? And just doing another nighttime stroll with you. Got the lighting set up. I think the sound is a little bit better as well, at least I hope it is. And trying out a new camera. This is the first of 2 or 3 or 4 different lenses, so we'll kind of see how it goes. And trying to invest a little bit more in quality here. So anyway, on to the lecture, except I have to tell you folks, if you'd like to write on our blog, go to csjoseph.life and then hover over contact us and do article submissions. You can earn rewards while writing psychology related blog posts for our blog at csjoseph.life. Awesome. Anyway, on to the lecture for real. So ENFJs, they are one of the 4 structure types, and in this particular lecture series, season 22, they are the last of the structure types. Our last episode we talked about ENTJs and as marshals, what they look at when they're cognitive transitioning. And it's just different forms of transitions. There's chaotic transitions versus orderly transitions. I actually had an experience recently in physics that gave me, physics or the physical reality, not the metaphysical one, about how that actually works mechanically. And I was sitting there with one of those 3-gallon water bottles, filling up a 64-ounce clean canteen water bottle. And it's because I got to drink like 3 of those a day for my current medical condition. And I think after the last 2 days, things are improving, which is good. But I was filling up my water bottle, and when you just let that water come right out of that bottle, it's like going that's like it's like having a hard time getting the air to come through, you know what I'm saying? And it's shaking around, the water's coming out violently. But then eventually, once there's enough air inside of the water bottle, if you aim it just right, the stream is nice and solid coming out. Nice and solid, no issue. It's smooth, nice and smooth. Goes right into that water bottle, real nice. And then you're not splashing all over the place. Water's not getting everywhere. It's orderly. It's not chaotic. And quite frankly, that's how cognitive transitions work. Cognitive transitions is when your mental energy, psychic energy, chakra, I have no idea, but whatever that mental energy life force that exists as the substance that makes up our souls, basically, that is, as it goes through the different gateways, that's how it moves to our souls. And it behaves like water, right? I was actually thinking about some additional metaphysical concepts about water, and wow, did I just feel a raindrop? Oh, I hope so. Hasn't rained here in a while. I could smell, you know that rain smell that you get before the water comes down? Yeah, 2 more droplets after that. It's getting good. We could be raining tonight, and I hope so, because good thing this setup is waterproof, if I do say so myself. So, be filming in the rain. Awesome. So anyway, so chaotic versus orderly transitions, it's kind of like water. And if you look at your mind, the 4 sides of the mind, it's like a farm, and it has irrigation. You're just letting water through the gates. And there are 4 gateways. There's the gateway to the ego, which is the hero. There is the gateway to the subconscious, which is the inferior function. And then there is the gateway into the unconscious, also known as the nemesis function or the villain function. And then the gateway into the superego, which is the 8th function, known as the demon function, which can turn angelic, which we talk about that in season 19, available on Patreon, patreon.com/csjoseph. Commercial over. So with that being said, cognitive transitions need to go into the other sides of the mind chaotically or orderly. When you have a chaotic transition, you end up getting a chaotic result, and it's no different for ENFJs. Now, they're structure types, which means they're direct, initiating, control. If you want to learn more about a structure type or that interaction style of direct, initiating, control, watch Season 2 and Season 15 on the YouTube channel at length. And then you'll be able to understand what that means. And then there's also, along with that, we have the fact that they're an NF, or an intuitive feeler, or an idealist, basically. They're abstract, they're affiliative, interest-based. They're interest-based because they're aware of what other people's interests are, what their interests are, always trying to create a win-win, feel manipulated when they have a win-lose, and the lose is on them and the win is the other person, or if they at least perceive it that way. That may not necessarily be true, but they may perceive it that way. And then become indignant. And indignance is something very common amongst NFJs. Indignance is reacting negatively or reacting poorly or having bad behavior as a result of perceived unfair treatment, right? And that's indignance. And it's, of course, anyone is capable of indignance, but it's especially an issue with NFJs, right? So, with that being said, so I step over the threshold here and not trip over myself. There are a lot of, ways to skin a cat when it comes to cognitive transitions, but ultimately, an orderly transition in any of the four sides of the mind represents a sign of growth. It represents a sign that a human being is closer to enlightenment than they were before. Now, there's all these people out there who are criticizing me when I say the word enlightenment because they maintain that the definition of enlightenment has to be exactly the same as the Buddhist definition, or the Hindu definition, or the Taoist definition. But quite frankly, I maintain all these definitions, not trying to be universalist here, but they can be universally similar. And I maintain that that's, they're pretty similar. Integration with your soul is basically what you're trying to do, because if you're disintegrated, if your soul is disintegrated, well, then you're falling behind. Life, and especially, for ENFJs, but for everyone, but speaking of ENFJs specifically, life is all about reaching a higher level integration. You start out life with your mind disintegrated, and then by the time you reach death, you're supposed to have your mind integrated. That's the goal. That's the reaching of enlightenment, where you finally have total unification of self, as well as the ability to remove the burdens caused by disintegration and be less burdened as a result of having integration. I think an example of this would be kind of when I was younger, I was very materialistic as a young child, for example, obsessed with toys and the like, and what I can get out of things, very depraved with SI inferior. But as I'm older, I have this other mentality now where I actually don't like materialism that much, and I seek to not be burdened by possessions, because I find possessions inhibiting me or getting in the way of things, right? Well, this is no different than when an ENFJ or anyone is able to reach higher levels of cognitive transition into their other sides of their mind. So the four sides of the mind for an ENFJ, the ego is obviously ENFJ, or the cleric type. The subconscious is the artificer, which is the ISTP type, aka the craftsman. And then their unconscious is known as the INFP, or the mystic type. And their superego is the ESTJ, the overseer, adjudicator type, right? So you have these four different human beings effectively existing within the mind of an ENFJ, four separate egos or potential egos, etc. So, and remember, the superego is trying to take over the mind, and because it's at odds with the mind, because it doesn't respect the ego, it sees the subconscious as something lacking in humility, and it also sees the unconscious as being foolish. And because of these issues, it can lead to some, transitions that are lacking in order, right? It leads to disorderly transitions. Why is that the case? Well, that could be because the cognitive gateways that are utilized to begin the process of cognitive transition, there's a lack of self-control. There's also a lack of ability to maintain mental cohesiveness between the other sides of the mind, right? Why is that? Well, look at it this way. When the gateways are not well developed enough, the gateway functions being the hero function, what happens when you have a gateway that's not well developed? Well, you find yourself in a situation where a person is lacking in, for example, personal responsibility, right? Because it's the ego's job to have a sense of personal responsibility. And when a person is irresponsible with their hero function, it can be really, really devastating, right? Here's an example, right? An SE hero who's irresponsible with their hero function would be inclined to beat their brother or tease their brother because they're like, oh, well, other kids are going to make fun of him in school, so I got to strengthen him now. I got to toughen him up a little bit so that he's good at school, when in reality, the situation, that SE hero is nothing more than someone who's abusive, right? Wow, thank you, SE hero. That's amazing conclusions that you're able to jump to. Not exactly useful. Not exactly strengthening, which is what an SE hero is supposed to be doing. Well, it's no different with ENFJs, because their FE hero, when it's irresponsible, is overly caring and can then eventually lead to, it can lead to like covert contracts or resentment, or I've given you all this, why won't you give to me? Why don't you appreciate me? When the person probably didn't even want to ask the ENFJ for help, and the ENFJ offered help, or sometimes the ENFJ forces help on the person, and slowly over time that person feels enslaved by the ENFJ, when the side of the mind that's enslaving by the ENFJ is actually the superego, the ESTJ. Because let's be honest, the ESTJ of all the types demands order and is potentially the most enslaving, ensnaring of all the types, because the ESTJ sees any form of chaos as something that is detrimental to its own existence, right? So it ends up causing the ENFJ to be that person who's super controlling with their FE hero, because they're irresponsible with their hero. Of course, the person doesn't become responsible with their hero until they've developed their parent function, and at that point, they're able to transition in a more healthier, orderly manner instead of something that's disorderly. Or look at the second gateway, the gateway into the subconscious, which is where a person's insecurity exists. ENFJs, especially hypocritical ones, it's like, oh, they force their way, they force themselves on you such that it's like, oh, yeah, you better listen to me, but I don't have to listen to you. It's really annoying, especially since how forgetful ENFJs are with SI Trickster. They all go out of their way to get you to listen to them, but they forgot that you already listened to them, and then it's their turn to listen, and they completely forgot, so they're not interested in listening to you. And then they get all butthurt when you stop listening to them because it's your turn to be listened to, because you might be a fellow TI user. And then their demon function comes out, their TE demon comes out to defend their inferior function, and it just starts controlling you. And it's like, well, if you're going to take away my voice, you don't get a voice. You don't get an opinion, TE demon says, until you listen to me, TI inferior. But the SI Trickster has forgotten all along all the times that you listen to the ENFJ, and it's really frustrating, and it's so hypocritical. They always do this. This is what I call the TI inferior steamroll, where TI inferior just literally steamrolls everybody. It's really frustrating, and it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do then? What am I supposed to do now, right? It's funny because nothing could take away your voice. Nothing could take away your opinion like TE demon. Good thing TE inferior exists to unleash TI demon upon TE demon, because it's like, well, if you're not going to listen to my opinion, then I'm just going to do what I think. And I think you're a piece of crap and I don't want to have anything to do with you. So goodbye, right? And then all of a sudden, there's no loyalty towards that ENFJ. You know, I bag on INFPs a lot for being disloyal people because their vice is treachery. But when you're dealing with an ENFJ, which is your golden pair, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense as to why they would be disloyal. Because when that TI inferior is steamrolling, because they're afraid of not being listened to, because they're afraid of being incorrect in something, or it's like, well, I've spent so much time thinking about this. Well, you have to listen to me. And TE inferior is like, I don't buy that. Why? Well, TI inferior is at risk of being ignorant sometimes. These are the people out there who are like, well, I have preferred input and I don't prefer to hear your opinion. That's a problem. Or they have last known input. They base their logical judgments on last known input. And it's like, well, I have chosen to keep my head in the sand and not listen to other input at all, which just pisses off TE inferior. And this is why INFPs end up being treacherous to ENFJs, because the ENFJs are not interested in their opinion. So they move on. It's like, why am I being loyal to this ENFJ to begin with? They're just giving to me to control me. So now I'm controlled and I don't get an opinion. Goodbye. So it's like, okay, at that point in time, I can empathize with those INFPs who are treacherous because, the ENFJ has become controlling. All as a result of their lack of humility from their TI inferior. If that TI inferior was actually humble, that TI inferior would be willing to listen to other inputs, even if, and the input of the TE inferior from the INFP, even if even if it disagreed with the INFP, and at least had an open mind. See, that's the problem with TI inferior. They can be very close-minded, which its close-mindedness is a form of pride and arrogance, which is why the ISTP subconscious ends up being used as a weapon instead of something that could build something, instead of something that's generative, instead of something that is constructive. The ISTP subconscious becomes destructive. And it's no wonder why that ENFJ can't get anyone to be loyal to them, especially their own children, for example. Especially when, the ENFJ has been suffering in their own childhood, and then because of that, end up having these warped FI nemesis standards. This is the third gateway we're talking about, where you end up having principles that are warped through abuse, through, a rough upbringing, etc., which doesn't, it's not even remotely helpful. And then they end up creating unnecessary competition between their children, because any areas that the ENFJ's own parents took issue with the ENFJ's inability to perform, when they're trying to shove a square screw in a round hole, or vice versa, right? That's probably actually a square peg in a round hole, or square hole, round peg. I don't know. Don't care. You get my point. But the ENFJ at that point, because they worry about their own value, because they worry about their own ability, they focus on overachieving, and they end up overachieving on worthless things, or they force their children to overachieve, and it could be on things that are not remotely worthless. It could be things like focusing on education that doesn't mean anything. I know an ENFJ who went to law school, got a degree, but didn't pass the bar exam. That was really useful. What a waste of time. But why did they do it? What? Just to impress people? Just to make their parents happy, to make their parents proud of them? When the reality situation is, their parents are probably a low compatibility type, and it would have been impossible to make their parents happy. Maybe that ENFJ with their TI inferior should have had the presence of mind to accept that that's probably what was happening, right? Maybe that was the truth. Oh, but they can't do that because FE hero, with that irresponsible hero gateway, got to keep giving, got to I care about what other people value. I care about what my parents value, not what I value. See, it's not until the ENFJ develops their own set of principles and identify truly what they value themselves and live to those values and live to those principles, do they become people of, well, value for quite frankly. Welcome to FI Nemesis. So they worry so much about themselves, and it creates this negative transition into their INFP, where they become the professor of the worthless. They become the professor of the novel, things that aren't actually useful. And then they end up having all of this information within that's either novel or arbitrary or ineffective or not actually anything that's helpful. This would be a problem, right? So what do you do in that situation? You get over your worry. Develop proper principles. If you don't know where to get proper principles, find people who have actually achieved something of use in their life, and then instead of focusing on what recognition you can extract from it yourself, focus on actually helping people for the sake of helping, and then learning that skill for the sake of helping, and not learning that skill based on how much recognition you get from what? Your child, your parents. You know, that might actually lead to a healthy transition, right? That sounds like an orderly transition. You know what I'm saying? Or you go beyond that. The fourth gateway, which is the demon function. Again, you know, you don't get to have an opinion if you're not going to listen to me. That's the problem with TE demon. TE demon, if it's not in its angelic form, it really does not care what other people think. Now, oftentimes, ENFJs are like, but I do care about what others think. No, Freudian slip. You care about how other people feel. You care about their value judgments. And if people think in terms of value judgments, okay, you could argue you're aware of what they think, but truly you're not aware of what they think. You're aware of what people value, and you just want people to value you. You want people to tell you that you're a smart person, when, let's be honest, you have TI inferior. Does that really mean you're the smartest person? The answer to that question is no, you're not. But you can be. You can be as soon as you let go of your pride. If you let go of your pride with TI inferior and stop being afraid that you might be incorrect and just accept that you are incorrect, and then after you reach that level of acceptance, instead of living in denial, you can actually begin the process of becoming brilliant. Neil deGrasse Tyson did this. He's a TI inferior. Look at him. He's a very accomplished physicist. Something that's actually useful. Something that actually has meaning, you know. See, ENFJs have this problem because of their pride and from their TI inferior, and because of their self-worth issues, they end up majoring in minor things or majoring in the wrong things, things that don't actually benefit them or others. They spend so much time as a people pleaser that they don't actually get anything done for themselves, which then causes, if this is like an ENFJ man, it causes women to lose respect for the ENFJ man, and then they abandon that ENFJ, right? Or this is an ENFJ woman. This is a woman who's not exactly lovable because everyone knows she's on the take, trying to mine people for recognition or force other people to give her recognition because I'm so giving, so you better love me. I'm so giving, so you better listen to me. I'm so giving, you better value me. And it's like, really? That's just another form of covert contract. And even though the ESFJ is the master of the covert contract, you're probably second place. Let's be honest. Don't do that, ENFJs. It's not appropriate. Your job is literally to help people for the sake of helping. Your job is to be constructive, not destructive. But your job is also to do it in a way where you're not losing self-respect. Self-respect goes a long way. And if you're not willing to take care of yourself in that manner, well, then that just shows that you're not respecting yourself. And how else is anyone going to respect you? How else is anyone going to be loyal to you if you're incapable of taking care of yourself? How are you going to do this, right? what's the plan then, right? Because you always have to have a plan, you ENFJs. Then you get so scared when you don't have a plan. How about, instead of being afraid of the truth, afraid of the fact that you're not really that smart, and stop living in denial, you might be better off. See, as soon as you admit that to yourself and get over being afraid of whether or not being smart and just reach that level of acceptance of, I'm not that smart, but I can outsmart everybody else around me if I spend time learning and mastering a particular subject or skill. Who can literally stand up to Neil deGrasse Tyson in physics? Not very many. Maybe Michio Kaku probably could, but let's be straight. Neil deGrasse Tyson's pretty much got that stuff on lockdown. He probably triggers Joe Rogan like crazy. I wonder if he was ever on Joe Rogan, but regardless, I mean, an ESTP would typically be triggered by an ENFJ. But anyway, the point is, Neil deGrasse Tyson got so specialized in physics, the guy's seen as an expert in his field, right? He's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's brilliant because he accepted that, you know what, I'm not that intelligent. And then because of that, he unlocked the ability to become one of the greatest thinkers of all time. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, let go of the fear, let go of the insecurity. And then you could access your ISTP subconscious in an orderly manner and become one of the greatest thinkers of all time. That might be nice. That might be achievable for you. But ENFJs, you have to let go of your pride to get there. So, what about your worry, right? Well, your worry, worried about whether or not you're a good person, right? As you transition in that side, well, that's not a good thing. But when you get over your worry, if you get over your self-worth and actually identify what your principles are, you'll stop majoring in minor things and you'll become that professor of something meaningful, that professor of something useful, a philosopher that is able to bring additional meaning to the word, a philosopher that you could teach other people, right? And then you could actually build that philosophy or build off that philosophy. That's something that really, really matters, right? Anyway, how do you, that's great. And then, demon, your demon function, where you could turn it into an angelic form, right? What's the angelic form? The angelic form is that you finally end up having mastery over memory, where you're SI trickster because you avidly go out of your way to take notes and store all of your physical memories in the environment to a point where you're so dedicated to storing your memories and not forgetting anything as an ENFJ, and remembering those people who actually were supportive to you, remembering those people who actually did listen to you, for example, because you have it written down, because you wrote it down, right? That's what it means. That's what it always means. Because if you write everything down, you're going to remember everything. And then you're one step closer to self-mastery. So why wouldn't you do that, right? It's all about self-mastery when it comes to superego. You can't obtain it until you're actually committed. But imagine, introverted sensing is about discipline and self-discipline. If you're actually wholly dedicated to, because you become aware that you forget things, but you're wholly dedicated to writing everything down, is that not an example of SI dedication itself? And that's an example of how you're turning your superego into a more angelic form, because you're spending all that time dedicated to making sure that you don't forget anything. Then as a result of not being able to forget people, you're no longer judging people, misjudging people because of something you forgot. And then you find yourself overjudging. That's effective. No wonder you're alienating people. No wonder people are abandoning you as an ENFJ. That's a problem. Try to get that fixed, right? So remember, your cognitive transitions, they can be unhealthy or they could be healthy, right? They could be chaotic or they could be orderly, right? So remember, for your ego, care for the sake of caring. Don't give to get. And you'll have the ability to start developing personal responsibility for your ego, right? Very important. Also, don't be so afraid about what you think. Don't be in denial of it either. Accept that you don't know that much. It's okay. Your job is to care for people first and foremost. But then eventually, as you spend time learning how to think and you study and you are accepting other forms of input, you can go into that ISTP subconscious and build these amazing things. My daddy's building a house right now, or he's building a car in his shop, or a motorcycle. His mechanical abilities are going up. Why? Because he took the time to read the manuals and study and experiment and trial and error. He wasn't so focused on the outcome, which was, finishing the house or finishing the car. He didn't care so much about that, and as much as he cared about learning about how. It's not about the why outcome, it's about the how. And the closer the ENFJ gets to the how, the better their ISTP subconscious will be developed, right? And then, their FI nemesis, where they're so worried about their self-worth. As soon as an ENFJ adopts a set of principles that they know for a fact are based in truth and not based on what other people value, at that point in time, the ENFJ has a healthy transition to their unconscious, and they're able to gain the wisdom from the unconscious and shed all of their foolishness, majoring in minor things, right? And then as a result of doing all those things, the demon wakes up. The demon is available. And then the ENFJ becomes one of the most caring individuals, most constructive individuals, most professorial, regal individuals out there, where they can have true benevolence. Because without that, they're just cruel. Misjudging everybody based on their cruelties. That's no wonder why anyone can't be, no wonder, like literally, no one can be loyal to the ENFJ. No wonder those INFPs are so treacherous to the ENFJs, for example. So anyway, a lot for you guys to think about. And just remember, when you're transitioning to the other side of your mind, it's all about integration, not disintegration. It's all about becoming somebody who is able to move past themselves and accept themselves for who they are and seek the meaningful things, not the expedient things, which is one of the biggest ENFJ struggles due to their impulsivities, right? Because if you're caring for the sake of caring, instead of just giving to get all the time, well, then guess what? You'll find yourself in a situation where you're not as impulsive because you're actually helping people who actually need to be helped, instead of helping people for the sake of a handout, helping people for the sake of sympathy. Because instead of trying to extract sympathy from somebody, you're actually helping build it within them so that they can share that sympathy with others. It's not about you, ENFJs. It's really not. It's also not about the people that you're trying to please. Having these unhealthy cognitive transitions leads to an unhealthy approval-seeking behavior, which is inappropriate and not a sign of maturity, right? You have to transition to a point where you're able to gain mastery of each of the sides of your mind. If you master your ISTP, you become happier. If you manage your INFP, you become, wiser, more mature, basically. These are all important, right? Imagine, trying to live vicariously through your children with your ISTP subconscious when it was inferior, and then you no longer have to do it because you actually are the star of the football team, or you actually are the quarterback, or you actually are the amazing car mechanic, or you actually are that person who takes risks and is able to get through any form of risky behavior, or go hike Half Dome Peak, or whatever it is, climb Mount Everest. You can do it if you spend time devoting yourself to it and having that form of dedication, right? So anyway, that concludes episode 4 for season 22. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, it'd be great if you guys were already subscribed to the YouTube channel. And season 22, while it's only available for email only, it will also be available eventually on the podcast and on YouTube one day when the lecture series ends. We're going to keep sending these out through email in the meantime. But otherwise, guys, thank you all for being my audience. I really appreciate it. And with that being said, I'll see you guys tonight.